Good morning, everybody. Please excuse any background noise. I am riding the bus home from work. I recently completed a series on the death of Sylvia Likens, and every bit of my research led me to the same conclusion that everybody else did, that Gertrude Banaszewski, the mother of 7 children who was taking care of Sylvia Likens and her sister Jenny for 4 months, was an evil woman. And in the last few hours, my opinion has changed 100% after talking to a co-worker and making a horrifying discovery. Basically, I put together some disjointed pieces of information, and this changes the entire story, which means Sylvia would never have died. Now, yes, I thought Gertrude was mentally ill, along with being evil. Unfortunately, the truth is much worse. Now, before we get to this point, we need to go 20 years back in time to when Gertrude Banaszewski was 16 or 17 years old, shortly after she was married. Now, she had asthma, and I believe she did have some mental illness. But here's something you have to realize about how women were perceived in the 1940s up to probably about 1970, and of course way beyond the before the 1940s. But it wasn't until that era where dangerous medications became available. Now, the attitude towards women at that time was that they were the weaker sex, not only physically but mentally. They were very fragile people, and if they experienced signs of hysteria, paranormal, concerns about their health that the doctors didn't understand, they were simply dismissed and given a pill to placate them. This is so dangerous. This is what happened to Gertrude Banaszewski starting when she was approximately 17 years old. She'd been married at the time, and she would be married until shortly before Sylvia Likens died. The drugs she was given, and I'm sure there were many, but the one she was on at the time of Sylvia Likens' death was phenobarbital. Now, here's a few instances where the effects of this medication and her overtaking it, because the doctors would give her as many pills as she wanted. You know, she was a woman, she was weak. She needed these pills. 4 of her doctors from the previous 20 years testified, and I'm actually surprised some of those medical records still existed, but doctors were, very small affairs at that time, so there wouldn't have been thousands of pages of records, and probably a typical doctor's office, even if the physician had been practicing for 40 years, wouldn't take up much more than 1 or 2 filing cabinets. All of these doctors described Gertrude as being mentally frail or hysterical, paranoid, etc., ad nauseum. One case is particularly telling. She had been diagnosed with a lump on her breast, which was never cancer because she later died of lung cancer. But the doctors wanted to remove it, which is, of course, a prudent decision. She didn't want to do this initially, and when she finally checked herself into the hospital to have the surgery, she basically freaked out and didn't want to have it. And you know, of course, the doctors did not attribute this to anything else other than she was a woman. Now, while medical doctors would have treated men differently if a man had had a psychiatric breakdown of the magnitude Gertrude had in a hospital, he would have been sent to a mental ward, doped up on heavy medication, and probably been there the rest of his life. So, psychiatric care back in the day was horrible for both men and women. Unfortunately, more women died because of this poor attitude. Now, these drugs did not only directly lead to the death of Sylvia Likens, they are 100% and directly responsible for Gertrude Banaszewski having 6 miscarriages. 6 innocent babies were never born because of medical malpractice. As I mentioned at the start of this video, it was a societal norm to believe that women were very weak mentally. Now, yes, doctors did not understand women's health problems because they were men and they had no incentive to learn them because, long story short, they did not understand that there was more of a difference between men and women than a few organs, and the fact that women are physically weaker. What I do blame the doctors for is assuming they were mentally weaker. You know, doctors even back in the day had about 8 years of medical education. So this is unexcusable that they allowed social mores to prejudice their health care of women. 7 children died in the Banaszewski household because of medical medical malpractice. I don't know how many other millions, and I believe that is truly the word, even though the population of the United States was much less back in the day. But I believe millions of children died between probably 1930 to 1970 because of medical malpractice and assuming that women were weak mentally. So I hope you have found this informative. Thank you very much.